and welcome to the fourth Witch v Witch challenge, which is in the Jiggoseum. It's like Colosseum, but with a jiggy. In this episode of Witch v Witch, I've decided not only to do the Gruntilda challenge, who left the tap on, but also no holds barred against the pig because, well, why not? So let's get started with that one first. The outer shell of his vehicle was not that difficult to replicate, and to figure out what was under the hood, all I had to do was get run over, so no troubles there. Unsurprising, our vehicles were fairly evenly matched, being exactly the same, but luckily I was able to outsmart my opponent, a victory to which I attribute my being slightly smarter than a video game pig. Rather than spending the entire match trying to equally counter his push, I instead attempted to angle him, turning him around until he was facing downhill, and so therefore giving me the advantage. This same tactic was used with much success for both rounds 2 and 3 as well, and the final result was even within a Trophy Thomas time. It wasn't the best time I've gotten, but that 11-second score was acquired by putting a giant bumper on the front of the Millennium Falcon and just pointing it in the direction of the pig, so I suppose 48 seconds is a pretty good score to get, especially when you're evenly matched and not utilizing a hyperdrive. And now moving on to the main event for which this series is titled, we're going to take on Gruntilda in Who Left the Tap On. Gruntilda's lobster vehicle is extremely simple, completely unbuildable, and entirely impossible to drive. So firstly, let's have a look at exactly why. To begin with, as you can see from me taking the photos, there's not exactly that many hidden features. It is, for the most part, only one block thick, and so in theory there should be absolutely no difficulty when it comes to replicating it. However, unfortunately, not unlike Gruntilda's fortress or pirate galleon, her vehicle apparently does not prescribe to the same game rules that ours do. And by this, I mean that her vehicle has more of a certain part, in this case the spikes, than you can actually have in the entire game. As there's not exactly a way to get around this, I just decided to begin with put the spikes on the top, the claws sticking out of the water, because that's what's going to be seen, which is of course a really foolish mistake because in the challenge you're going to be using those claws to push inflated balls, which are popped by the spikes. I mean, that's the entire reason that Gruntilda's vehicle is covered in them. I then therefore moved the spikes down onto the body of the vehicle and tried the challenge again, which is when I encountered the next issue. Her vehicle is practically impossible to drive and really doesn't handle the way Grunty's does. That is to say that my copy of Grunty's vehicle doesn't handle the way Grunty's does. The Grunty's vehicle that Grunty's driving obviously does drive the way Grunty's does because that's what I'm comparing it to. Which is exactly what I expected from your seat being sat in the way it is and you only having one large jet pointing down. And really at this point of copying Grunty's vehicles, I'm not really surprised that her interaction with the game's physics is completely different than yours. Can you still beat Grunty with your vehicle behaving the way it does? Yes, maybe, probably. I couldn't, but I'm sure it's definitely possible. I just completely lost patience with it because not being able to control your vehicle in any real sense got really tedious. I decided to go back into the editor and rotate the entire vehicle excluding the driver's seat so that the jet was facing backwards and the entire vehicle was sort of more laying down as you would expect this vehicle to be rather than pointing upwards, which is what was causing it to bounce around on its tail and not really have any control. I also added in a gyroscope for good measure. And now after that brief modification, it's time to go back and re-challenge Grunty. Once I had made this modification, the challenge actually became doable. The claws are actually pretty much the perfect size to hold the bowl in, and even though the vehicle pretty much lacks any maneuverability, and Grunty's waves and ramming you and whatnot and popping your bowl causes quite a few troubles, it is at least an achievable challenge. That said, even with this modification, I was still only able to eventually, as you'll see by the end of this video, score 4 goals, which is actually the base minimum to achieve a Jiggy score. However, a mere Jiggy score was the target, so I'll take it anyway. Now, some of you might well argue, but Grim, you've modified her vehicle. The entire point of this challenge you put forward is to use an exact replica of Grunty's vehicle to beat Grunty herself. And so therefore you might well put forward the argument that I've not actually achieved anything in this video and I've failed immensely. To which I must of course respond, that's a fair cop, and if you hold that point of view, I'm not going to argue it because I definitely, at least to some degree, agree with you entirely. Sticking to the exact rules as I laid them out in the first Witch v Witch video, I definitely could not have beaten Grunty by using an exact replica of her vehicle. And in fact, I could not actually even create an exact replica of her vehicle because her vehicle has more parts than I have available to me. However, I have, to my defense, some convoluted logic that I'm not entirely pleased with, but I'm going to put forward anyway. By changing my vehicle ever so slightly, I have, in fact, ever so slightly cheated, which means that I was only changing my playstyle to Grunty's in that we were both cheating, and therefore it was possibly the most equal Witch v Witch challenge to date. If you buy that excuse, feel free to chalk this up as a victory. If you don't, feel free to chalk it up as a failure. But I think if I'm going to be completely honest with myself, this point probably goes to Grunty. Good job, old girl, you've earned it. However, it's still 3-1 my way, so I'll see you in the next Which v Which challenge. And so as this video comes to an end, and as the challenge continues to play out in the background, I'll do some housekeeping and an outro, and after I've stopped talking, as always, it'll go to the layer by layer of both the vehicles. So, thanks for watching, and until next time, I have been and still am Grim Grindle. See, I actually lied, I'm not really going to be doing much housekeeping, because there's not really much to say, and I'm just running down the clock until the challenge finishes. You see, the match is 3 minutes in length, and yet 2 minutes in, I've said everything that needs to be said. It's probably a strong objection to point out that if you're just trying to run down the clock, you're not actually supposed to tell your viewers that you're just trying to run down the clock, because it's not sneaky, you're supposed to be sneaking about it. And that's an excellent point, but the fact of the matter is, if you are telling people you're running down the clock, it takes up time, and therefore it actually helps quite a bit with the actions of running down said clock. But I digress. The first vehicle we'll do the layer by layer for is the pig's vehicle for No Holds Barred. Following this will be the layer by layer for Grunty's Zoidberg vehicle, which is what you're looking at on the screen right now, but it will indeed be this version exactly, as in the modified version, not the exact copy of Grunty's vehicle. If you're not happy with this and you're a bit of a purist, just reverse the modifications I did to the vehicle, removing the gyroscope and re-rotating the vehicle back to its normal position, and you'll have the closest you can get to an exact replica of Grunty's lobster. And with that, the time is perfectly run down, and I hope you've enjoyed this video and you enjoy the layer by layers.